"Get out, right now!" Grandpa's words hit like a slap in front of my entire family. At first, I thought it was a mistake, until I saw the smirk on Uncle Raymond's face. I walked out humiliated, thinking Christmas had just imploded. 20 minutes later, the house was on fire. Flames devoured everything: photos, memories, proof. By morning, Raymond was already telling the town I'd done it. Said I'd stormed out after a fight over money. Then the bank showed forged signatures under my name. The insurance lapsed, and somehow my email was changed. But Grandpa's order wasn't rejection. It was strategy. And he left me one thing they didn't know about. One thing that will ruin them all. My name is Michael Whitaker, and I'm 45 years old. Every morning, I drive my pickup through our small Midwestern town to the hardware store I've managed for 2 decades, without a single complaint. My grandfather Walter built an empire of farmland that brings the whole family together for holiday dinners, though my Uncle Raymond, Dad's younger brother, treats these gatherings like business meetings. The cedar-scented porch where Grandpa taught me, "Character is the real fortune," still creaks just the same. But Raymond's habit of cutting off conversations makes my jaw clench. I keep every receipt, note every date, and maintain the kind of detailed records Grandpa always respected. His weathered eyes still watch us all, especially during Christmas dinner, measuring worth beyond wealth. But let me start from the beginning. I pulled into Grandpa's gravel drive at exactly 6:15 p.m., same as every Christmas. The 2-story farmhouse glowed amber through frosted windows, and someone had strung white lights along the wraparound porch where I'd helped sand and stain boards every spring since I was 12. You know that moment when you can tell something's different, but you can't put your finger on what. That's how it felt stepping onto that porch. Inside, the familiar mingling of pine sap and roasting turkey should have been comforting, but Grandpa's stare caught me before I could even shed my coat. He sat rigid in his leather armchair, watching me with an intensity that made my spine straighten. 45 years old, and his eyes still had that effect. "Everyone to the table," he announced, voice cutting through the tinkling of wine glasses and cousin chatter. That was odd already. Usually he'd let us mill around for at least 20 minutes before dinner. I found my usual spot, the chair creaking as I settled in. The gleam of sterling silver and crystal sparkled under chandelier light. Everything arranged just so, like always. But Grandpa didn't reach for the grace card propped against his water glass. Instead, his weathered hands gripped the edge of the table as his gaze swept across our faces, lingering on each one. When he reached me, something in his expression made my stomach drop. "Michael." The room went dead quiet. "I want you to leave. Right now." For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. "I'm sorry." "What?" "You heard me. Get out of my house." The words hung there like icicles. Every eye at that table locked onto me. Mom's confusion, Dad's pale shock, and worst of all, Uncle Raymond's barely concealed smirk. My face burned hot enough to melt steel. "Grandpa, I don't understand." No discussion. His tone could have frozen hell. "Leave." Chair legs scraped against hardwood as I stood, mechanical, like someone else was pulling my strings. The walk to the coat rack felt endless. Each step echoed under the weight of 24 stairs. Every pair of eyes pinning me like a butterfly in a display case. My cousin David stood near the door, his usually cheerful face drawn with concern. I managed a stiff nod as I shrugged into my winter coat, fingers fumbling with the buttons. The brass doorknob felt ice cold in my palm. Outside, the temperature had dropped enough to turn my breath into ghost shapes under the pewter December sky. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The porch boards creaked under my feet. The same boards where Grandpa and I had sat sharing lemonade just last summer, talking about nothing and everything. My truck started on the first try, thank God for small mercies. I backed out slowly, half expecting, hoping, someone would come running out to tell me it was all a mistake. But the only movement was the slight flutter of curtains as someone watched me leave. In the rearview mirror, those dark gables looked different somehow, more threatening than the familiar peaks of my childhood. I kept replaying Grandpa's words in my head, searching for some hidden message in his tone, some clue I might have missed. Had someone said something about me? Had I done something wrong without realizing it? The county road stretched ahead, empty and dark. I clicked off the radio. Couldn't stand the cheerful Christmas carols right then. My hands were locked on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, just like Grandpa taught me when I was 15. Even now, I was following his lessons. The headlights of the house disappeared around a bend, and that's when my phone started buzzing in the cup holder. You ever have that moment where you know, Picking up the phone is going to change everything? That's exactly how it felt. Watching that screen light up in the darkness. I nearly dropped the phone when I saw David's name flash across the screen. My cousin had never called me after dark before. Something cold and heavy settled in my gut as I pulled onto the gravel shoulder. David? What's… Mike, the house! His voice cracked like thin ice. It's on fire. Everything's on fire. My fingers went numb on the steering wheel. What do you mean on fire? The whole place is going up. Firefighters everywhere. You need to… Static crackled. Just get back here. The line went dead. For a long moment, I sat there staring at the silent barns beyond the ditch, their weathered sides pale as bones in the moonlight. Remember how your dad taught you to breathe when things got rough? In through the nose, out through the mouth. It wasn't working. I yanked the truck around so fast the tires spat gravel. Even 2 miles out, I could see an orange glow staining the clouds. The closer I got, the brighter it burned, until flames were literally punching holes in the night sky. But a quarter mile from the house, I hit the roadblock. Deputy's cruiser, lights spinning, cutting the road in half. Had to park by Miller's feed store and walk up. A crowd had already gathered. Seemed like half the county was there, faces lit red and blue by emergency lights. The old Reynolds couple from down the road. Pastor Matthews wringing his hands. Even Frank Chen from the hardware store. They all gave me these strange sideways looks as I pushed through. Then I saw it. The house, Grandpa's house, our house, was an inferno. Flames roared out every window, turning the grand old Victorian into a skeleton of light. The heat hit me like a wall even from 50 yards back. You know that smell when you accidentally touch a hot stove? Multiply that by 1,000. Completely irresponsible. Uncle Raymond's voice cut through the crowd. He was standing near the fire chief, gesturing sharply. The insurance situation is absolutely unclear. Someone dropped the ball, and I intend to find out who. That word, insurance, rippled through the onlookers. Then someone whispered, lapsed, and my blood ran cold. No insurance? That was impossible. Grandpa Walter never let anything lapse in his life. At least everyone got out, Mrs. Reynolds said, touching my arm. That's the important thing, right? I nodded numbly, watching smoke eat the sky. The house where I'd learned to walk, where Grandpa taught me chess in his study, where every Christmas morning had smelled like coffee and pine needles, all of it turning to ash. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Uncle Raymond's voice again, louder now. He'd positioned himself in the center of the largest group of neighbors. Michael leaves in such a hurry, and not 20 minutes later, he let the sentence hang. The sideways glances got harder, more obvious. Heads nodded. Of course they'd believe Raymond. He was the successful one, the smooth talker, the man who'd never left town. I was just the quiet nephew who kept to himself. A fresh burst of flames lit up the night as part of the roof collapsed. The sound was like thunder, but worse. Because this was memory breaking. This was history burning. And somehow, watching it all come down, I knew this was just the beginning. Raymond spotted me then. He turned slowly, deliberately, until our eyes met across the crowd. The emergency lights painted his face in alternating red and shadow, but I could still see that smirk clear as day, the same one he'd worn at dinner. Well, well, he said, loud enough to carry. Michael, how nice of you to join us. He stepped closer, that smile never wavering. Tell me something. Why did you leave so suddenly earlier? What was so important? The question hung in the smoky air like an accusation. Every face in the crowd turned toward me, waiting for an answer. And that's when I felt it. Not fear, not anymore. Something harder, something that burned hotter than any fire. First thing next morning, I hit the ground running. You ever notice how determination feels different from desperation? It's cleaner somehow, keeps your hands steady even when your mind's racing. I spread everything across my kitchen table. Old bank statements, phone records, even the little pocket calendar where I mark everything down. Call me old-fashioned. But Grandpa Walter taught me to keep records of everything. Paper trails don't lie, he'd say, tapping his temple with one weathered finger. The morning light caught dust motes dancing above my careful notes, reminding me of early mornings in his study, watching him sort through farm receipts. The Central Plains Credit Union opened at 9. I was there at 8:50, standing in the parking lot, breath clouding in the December air. Inside, Mrs. Holbrook, who'd known me since I opened my first savings account at 16, looked uncomfortable when I approached her desk. Michael, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I'll need to get Mr. Patterson for this. Patterson was one of those younger managers who wore suits a size too small to look important. He came out clutching a manila folder like it was evidence in a murder trial. "These transactions," he said, laying out 3 statements, "were all properly authorized." His finger traced down to where my signature appeared at the bottom of each one. 5,000 here, 8,000 here, and 12,000 just last week. I leaned in close, studying those signatures. At first glance, they looked right, but something was off. The way the M curved, how the K connected. Like someone had practiced getting it just right, but missed the natural flow. You know how your own signature just happens? These were too perfect. "That's not my signature," I said. Patterson's face went blank. "Are you suggesting fraud?" "I'm stating it outright." He gathered the papers quickly. "We'll need to open an investigation. But Mr. Whitaker," he lowered his voice, "given the current circumstances, you understand we'll have to be thorough." Walking out, I almost ran into Gretchen Weber from 3 houses down. She'd been Grandpa's neighbor for 30 years, always bringing over her famous snickerdoodles during the holidays. "Michael!" She caught my arm. "I've been meaning to talk to you." Her voice dropped to that special small-town whisper that carries farther than a shout. "About that argument you had with your grandfather last month." My stomach clenched. "What argument?" "Oh, don't play coy. Everyone heard about it. Something about money?" Her eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Must have been serious the way he was talking. "There was no argument, Gretchen. Not ever." But I could see in her face. The damage was done. The story was already out. There, growing like weeds through garden stones. Back in my truck, my phone buzzed. Mom's number. I almost didn't answer, but guilt won out. "Michael?" Her voice was small, scared. Not my strong mother who'd raised me alone after Dad died. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Always, Mom." A long pause. "Did something desperate happen? With you and Dad's money? Because if you're in trouble, we can—" "Mom, stop," my voice cracked. "You know me. You raised me." I thought I did. The words hit like slaps. "I just don't understand any of this." After we hung up, I sat there gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. 45 years of showing up early, staying late, keeping my word, all of it crumbling like ash in the wind. My phone pinged again. A text from David. "Heads up. Estate gets divided New Year's Day unless there's legal action to stop it. Automatic trigger in the trust docs." I pulled up my calendar app. December 26th glowed back at me. 5 days. 5 days to stop a freight train of lies from running me over. The screen dimmed, then brightened again as it hit midnight. Another day gone. I stared at those changing numbers, feeling time slip through my fingers like sand. I woke up with my neck cramped from falling asleep at my desk. Frost had drawn delicate patterns across my window, like nature's own connect-the-dots puzzle. My calendar showed December 22nd, exactly 10 days until the New Year's deadline. Ever count backwards to something you're dreading? Each number feels heavier than the last. Remember those old rotary phones? How you had to wait for the dial to spin back before the next number? That's how it felt calling Midwest Mutual Insurance. Each button press was slow, deliberate, like I was trying to delay whatever bad news waited on the other end. "I'm calling about Walter Whitaker's property insurance," I said when I finally got through. "Policy number WP4472B. Keys clicked on the other end. "I'm showing that policy lapsed for non-payment 3 weeks ago," the agent said, like she was reading off a lunch menu. "We sent multiple notices to the authorized contact." My throat went dry. "Who was the contact?" More clicking. "Michael Whitaker. That would be you, correct? Our records show you requested all communications be redirected to your email back in October." I pressed my fingertips against my temple. I never made that request. "Sir, we have the signed authorization right here." Another forged signature. Another carefully laid trap. You ever notice how Winterlight seems thinner somehow? Like it's stretching itself too far? That morning, I drove through neighborhoods I'd known all my life, watching that pale sun bounce off windows while I tried to piece together what people remembered about Christmas week. "Mrs. Chen at the corner store. You seemed upset about something last Tuesday." "Money troubles," someone said. Bob Tucker walking his retriever. "Heard you and Walter had words about the farm's future. Tough situation." Even Pete at the hardware store, who'd sold me nails and lumber for 20 years, gave me a look that said he wasn't sure what to believe anymore. By afternoon, I found myself back at the property line of Grandpa's place. The house was gone. Just blackened beams and ash where memories used to live. The air still carried that bitter, burnt smell that sticks in your nose and won't let go. Uncle Raymond was there with a group of volunteers. directing cleanup like a general commanding troops. His voice carried deliberately across the yard. "Don't worry about sorting through all this yet. I'll be handling the estate matters personally." He turned just enough to make sure I heard every word. "We need to protect what's left of Walter's legacy." The way he said legacy made my hands curl into fists. The sheriff's office was my next stop. Deputy Mills, who'd coached my baseball team in high school, couldn't quite look me in the eye. "Mike," he said, shuffling papers on his desk, "if this turns into formal accusations, you're gonna want to lawyer up. Fast." He lowered his voice. "Ray's been in here twice already, asking about arson investigations." Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. The winter sky was turning that deep purple blue that comes just before full dark. Options were slipping away faster than daylight. Grandpa's words kept echoing in my head. "Leave now." Just those two words, sharp and clear as the dinner bell he used to ring from the back porch. Why that night? Why so sudden? There had to be more to it. Like one of those riddles he used to love, where the answer's right in front of you if you could just shift your perspective. At home, I opened my laptop and created a new document. Titled it, Timeline, Proof of Innocence. The cursor blinked at me, steady as a heartbeat. I had 10 days to unravel this mess. 10 days to save my name and my future. That's when my phone lit up. Unknown number. You know that moment when your whole world's spinning, and suddenly something solid appears to grab onto? That's what Mr. Jensen's voice was on my phone that night. "Michael, this is Arthur Jensen. I was your grandfather's attorney, and his friend from Korea." The gravelly warmth in his tone steadied my racing thoughts. "I think we need to talk. Tonight, if possible." I'd seen him at family gatherings over the years, always in the background, watching quietly like Grandpa did. Something about that memory made me trust him instantly. "I can be anywhere in 20 minutes, I said. "My office, the small one on Maple, not the downtown firm." He paused. "The side door will be unlocked." The winter night had turned bitter cold, but I barely felt it as I drove. Every streetlight seemed to hold its breath, until I pulled up to a modest brick building with a single lamp burning inside. The brass plate beside the door read simply, "A. Jensen, Attorney at Law." Inside, the office smelled of old leather and fresh coffee. Dark wood paneling absorbed the light from a green-shaded desk lamp, and filing cabinets lined the walls like silent sentinels. Mr. Jensen stood as I entered. Tall, lean, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much war to waste time on nonsense. "Sit down, son," he said, gesturing to a worn leather chair. "Your grandfather knew this was coming." My heart skipped. "The fire?" He shook his head. "The power play. Walter wasn't one for dramatic shows of authority, unlike some people we know. He didn't need to say Raymond's name. He watched, he listened, and he planned accordingly. The coffee he poured me was strong enough to stand a spoon in. "I've known you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper," he continued. "More importantly, I knew your character through Walter's eyes. He talked about you often." Setting down his cup, he laid out a plan as precise as a military operation. "First, we establish your whereabouts for the past month. Every receipt, every witness, every digital timestamp. Second, we get exemplars of your authentic signature and compare them to these mysterious authorizations. Third, we trace every contact with the insurance company back to its source." From his briefcase, he pulled out a legal pad and a small digital recorder. "Let's start with Christmas night. I want every detail about Walter's command for you to leave. Word for word, gesture by gesture." For the next hour, I relived that moment under the recorder's red eye. The way Grandpa's voice had cut through the dinner chatter. The shocking simplicity of, "Leave now." The weight of every eye as I walked out. "Good," Jensen said when I finished. "First thing tomorrow, I'm requesting official document images from both the bank and the insurance company, with metadata intact." He smiled thinly. Amazing how much digital fingerprints can tell us about when and where papers are actually signed. He slid his legal pad across the desk. "Use this to timeline everything you remember from the past 6 weeks. People, places, payments, anything that proves where you were and what you were doing." His pen underlined January 1st twice. "The estate distribution deadline isn't changing, but neither is the truth." Checking his watch, he stood. "Meet me here at 8 tomorrow morning. We'll go through whatever the bank sends over." As I rose to leave, his eyes drifted to a locked drawer in his desk. Walter left something in my keeping. For the right moment, I wanted to ask what it was, but something in his expression told me to wait. Sometimes, I remembered, Grandpa's best lessons came from learning patience. "Get some rest," he said, walking me to the door. Tomorrow we start pushing back. The December sun hadn't cleared the horizon when I pulled into the empty parking lot behind Jensen's office. My breath clouded in the pre-dawn air as I hurried to the side door. Already unlocked as promised. Inside, the fax machine was humming, spitting curled pages into its tray. Jensen looked up from his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose. Right on time. Coffee's fresh. You know how sometimes the smallest normal thing, like pouring coffee into a styrofoam cup, can steady your nerves? That's what I needed right then. These just came in from First Midwest, Jensen said, spreading several documents across his desk. Your signature cards from when you opened your accounts, plus the recent authorization forms. I leaned in, studying the familiar loops and curves of my own handwriting next to the forgeries. Look at this, Jensen pointed with a pencil. See how the real signatures flow naturally? Now watch the hesitation marks here and here in the fakes, where someone had to think about what came next. He was right. My actual signature had the confidence of 30 years' practice. The forged ones showed tiny stops and starts, like someone drawing a map instead of writing their name. What about the insurance papers? I asked. Coming, but slower. Their legal department has to approve release of internal records. Jensen checked his watch. They're promising everything within 24 hours. That's another day gone, I said, feeling the calendar's weight. We've got what, 7 days left? Jensen nodded, already dialing his phone. Let me push them on the IP logs and branch security footage. Meanwhile, start calling anyone who can verify your movements that night. I pulled out my phone and texted David. Need exact time I left Christmas dinner. Critical. While we waited, Jensen drafted official letters to both institutions. This puts them on notice to preserve all records. Prevents any convenient, routine deletion of digital evidence. My phone buzzed. David had sent a selfie he'd taken that night, showing him and his kids by the Christmas tree. The timestamp read 7:42 p.m., about 10 minutes after I'd left. Perfect, Jensen said, adding it to our growing file. Now, what about this neighbor who claims she heard you arguing with Walter? I found Gretchen's number and put the call on speaker. When I asked about the supposed argument, she hesitated. Well, I didn't exactly hear it myself. Raymond mentioned it at the grocery store. Jensen's eyebrows rose as he made notes. After I hung up, he circled the calendar on his desk. December 25th to January 1st. 7 days to prove my innocence. The morning light had filled the office by then, warming the wood paneling. Jensen stood and walked to his desk, keyring jingling. There's something else we need to discuss. The drawer opened with a solid click. Inside lay a cream-colored envelope, sealed with wax in the old-fashioned way. Jensen rested his hand on it, but didn't pick it up. Walter left this with me months ago. Said I'd know when the time was right. He looked at me steadily. He wanted the timing to protect the truth, not obscure it. My throat felt dry. What's in it? Before I show you, take a deep breath. What you learn here. He paused, choosing his words carefully. It's going to change how you see certain members of your family. Walter knew that. He also knew you needed to see the evidence of present crimes before understanding past ones. The envelope lay between us now, its red wax seal catching the morning light. I stared at my grandfather's distinctive W pressed into the wax, remembering how he'd always said timing was everything. Ready? Jensen asked quietly. I reached for the envelope, my fingers trembling slightly. The wax seal cracked with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet office. Inside was a single folded document, crisp and official looking. This is a duplicate, Jensen said. The original is in my firm's vault downtown. You ever have one of those moments where you know you're about to cross a line and nothing will ever be the same after? That's exactly how it felt, unfolding that paper. My grandfather's familiar handwriting filled the margins with notes, but it was the typed text that grabbed me first. Last will and testament of Walter James Whitaker. The date stopped me cold. Just 3 weeks ago. Keep reading, Jensen urged softly. I skimmed past the formal opening paragraphs until a particular section made my breath catch. I hereby explicitly and irrevocably disinherit my son Raymond Whitaker from any claim to my estate, properties, or holdings. There's more, Jensen said. The next paragraph hit me like a physical blow. I leave the entirety of my estate to my grandson, Michael Whitaker, conditional upon his proven non-involvement in any damage or destruction to my primary residence. My knees felt weak. I grabbed the edge of Jensen's desk. He knew. Somehow he knew something was coming. Look at the margin notes, Jensen pointed with his pencil. Grandpa's precise handwriting spelled out dates, times, and overheard conversations. He'd documented everything, including what he called anticipated interference. The word choice sent a chill through me. This will was executed after that supposed argument you had with him, Jensen said. The one Raymond's been spreading rumors about. Walter was already watching, already planning. I sank into the chair. But why didn't he warn me? Would you have believed the worst about your family without seeing it yourself? Jensen asked. He shuffled through some papers. Besides, Walter was playing a longer game. He wanted proof, not just suspicion. What do we do with this? Jensen glanced at his watch. First, we file notice of the will's existence immediately. Then we request an emergency hearing based on the ongoing arson investigation and the January 1st deadline. He started gathering documents. The courthouse closes in 20 minutes. My stomach nodded. This makes it real. Once we file, there's no going back. They'll all be legal adversaries. They already are, Jensen said firmly. They just don't know you know it yet. The truth needs daylight, not whispers. He was right, but my hands still shook as I helped him organize the paperwork. The weight of what we were about to do, what my grandfather had set in motion, felt almost too heavy to carry. One thing's bothering me, I said, pausing with a stack of papers. Why make me prove I wasn't involved with the fire? Why not just leave everything to me outright? Jensen's eyes crinkled. Because Walter knew the best defense is a good offense. By making your innocence a condition, he gave us legal grounds to investigate everything that happened. Every document, every conversation, every bank record. It all becomes relevant to proving you deserve the inheritance. He didn't just leave me his property, I realized. He left me the tools to expose whatever Raymond was planning. Exactly. Jensen checked his watch again. We've got 15 minutes to get this filed. Ready? I looked down at the will in my hands, at my grandfather's careful notes in the margins. All those quiet dinners when he'd seemed to be just watching. He'd been gathering intelligence. Every time Raymond had cut someone off or smirked across the table, Grandpa had been taking mental notes. Character's the real fortune, I whispered, finally understanding what he'd meant all along. Jensen held open his office door. Come on. Time to show them what that fortune's worth. The courthouse steps felt steeper than usual as Jensen and I raced the closing bell. We made it with 12 minutes to spare, but those minutes stretched like hours while the clerk processed our filing. Emergency motion? She peered over, her reading glasses at the stack of documents. These usually need more notice. Time-sensitive estate matter, Jensen explained, pointing to the New Year's Day deadline. And there's an ongoing arson investigation. She raised an eyebrow at that, but kept typing. Each click of her keyboard felt like a countdown timer. 3 days before New Year's, she finally announced, stamping the hearing date on our copies. Judge Harrison's courtroom. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't much time, but it was something. Now the real work starts, Jensen said as we headed back to his office. He was already on his phone, firing off subpoenas to the insurance company and the bank. We need those records before the hearing. Ever watch someone take apart a clock? That's what the next few hours felt like. Jensen methodically dismantling Raymond's scheme piece by piece. The insurance company's initial response landed first, and it was a gold mine. Policy change requests had come from an email address that was just one character off from my own, but the structure matched Raymond's usual username pattern perfectly. Got you, Jensen muttered, circling the address, but we need that affidavit from their compliance department to make it stick. The bank records were even better. They showed a pattern of teller overrides on dates when Raymond had been seen at the branch. Dates I could easily prove I was elsewhere. My meticulous receipt-keeping habit was finally paying off. Your grandfather was right about you, Jensen said, nodding at my organized timeline. Detail-oriented to a fault, but just when momentum felt like it was building, we hit a wall. The key clerk who'd processed those overrides had left for holiday vacation. Without her sworn statement, we had a gap in our proof chain. I stood in the fluorescent-lit hallway outside Jensen's office, feeling that familiar weight settle back onto my shoulders. You know that moment when you're so close to something, but it still feels miles away? That's where I was. Maybe we should just let it go, I said, watching shadows creep across the parking lot. Is it worth tearing the family apart in public? Jensen's face hardened. That's exactly what Raymond's counting on. That you'll fold to protect the family name while he walks away with everything. But your grandfather trusted you with this. Jensen cut in. He knew it would come to this moment, and he chose you to carry it through. I headed home in the dark, engine idling at stoplights while my mind raced. The dashboard clock seemed to mock me with each passing minute. Was I really ready to drag family into a courtroom? To stand up and accuse my own uncle of fraud and maybe worse? The memory of Raymond's smirk in the firelight that night flickered through my mind. He'd been so sure of himself, so certain I'd take the fall. Maybe that's what Grandpa had seen coming all along. Not just the betrayal, but the arrogance behind it. My phone buzzed just as I pulled into my driveway. Courthouse voicemail. I felt my pulse quicken as I punched in the access code. Emergency hearing granted, the clerk's recorded voice announced. 9 a.m. tomorrow, Judge Harrison presiding. I sat there in the dark car, letting those words sink in. Tomorrow. In less than 12 hours, we'd be laying everything out in open court. No more whispers, no more shadows. Just truth under oath, however ugly it might be. You ever notice how the hardest steps are sometimes the ones you have to take fastest? That's what this felt like. The clock was running, evidence was still missing, and my own family was about to face off in front of a judge. I pulled out my phone to text Jensen the news, but he'd beaten me to it. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we show them what your grandfather saw in you. The thing about character is, sometimes you don't know you have it until it's tested. I was about to find out just how much of my grandfather's fortune I'd really inherited. The next morning, I stepped into courtroom B with my heart hammering against my ribs. Weak winter sunlight striped the wooden benches through tall windows, making the whole place feel like a church. You ever notice how courtrooms have that effect? Like every whisper echoes straight to heaven. Jensen touched my elbow, guiding me to our table. Remember, he murmured, let the evidence do the talking. Raymond sat at the other table, ramrod straight in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car. He didn't even glance my way, but I could feel the tension rolling off him in waves. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in pinstripes, was already spreading papers like playing cards. Judge Harrison entered, and the bailiffs all rise snapped everyone to attention. She was older than I expected, with steel gray hair and reading glasses that magnified her eyes. Those eyes didn't miss much, I could tell. Jensen laid out our case like he was assembling a puzzle. First, the Christmas dinner. My public expulsion, witnessed by everyone present. Then the fire, breaking out within minutes of my forced departure. The suspicious insurance lapse, the forged bank transactions, the whisper campaign that somehow always traced back to Raymond. Your Honor, Jensen said, pulling out David's phone. This time-stamped photo proves exactly when Mr. Whitaker left the property. The image showed David's face in the foreground, the house still intact behind him, with that evening's date and time clear as crystal. Furthermore, Jensen continued, we have logs from the insurance company showing policy changes initiated from an email address deliberately designed to mimic my clients. He held up the printouts. We're awaiting certified copies, but the pattern is clear. Raymond's lawyer shot to her feet. Objection, Your Honor. This is pure speculation and character assassination. My client has served as the family's financial advisor for years. Any involvement in policy updates was purely routine. Judge Harrison peered over those magnifying glasses. Was it routine to process policy changes without the named owner's direct authorization? Raymond shifted in his chair. First crack in that stone face I'd seen all morning. And these bank overrides, the judge continued, flipping through her papers. Multiple transactions benefiting Mr. Raymond. All processed without standard verification. That strikes me as rather convenient. Jensen stood again, holding up Grandpa's will. Your Honor, Walter Whitaker anticipated this kind of interference. It's explicitly referenced in his final testament, along with his clear intention to protect his grandson's inheritance. I watched Raymond's jaw tighten at that. Guess he hadn't counted on Grandpa being 3 steps ahead of him. Judge Harrison studied the will for what felt like hours. Finally, she looked up. Given the serious nature of these allegations and the pending estate division, I'm continuing this matter for final submissions. She checked her calendar. New Year's Eve morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I want certified copies of all documentation by then. The gavel crack made me jump. As people started shuffling out, Jensen grabbed my arm. We need that affidavit from the insurance company and the teller's statement. Today. We stepped out into sleeting rain, the courthouse steps slick and treacherous. I gripped the iron railing, nodding as Jensen laid out our next moves. Above us, the big courthouse clock showed just past 11. The hour hand seemed to crawl, mocking every second we still needed to build our case. I was staring up at that clock face when my phone buzzed. The display showed a number I didn't recognize, but Jensen's eyes lit up when I showed him. That's the insurance company's compliance officer, he said. Answer it. I hit accept with fingers that had nothing to do with the winter chill. The insurance company's compliance officer, Ms. Chen, met us in a sterile conference room that reeked of dry toner and cleaning products. You know that smell. Like every corporate meeting space trying too hard to forget its last occupants. "I've reviewed the authentication logs," she said, spreading printouts across the table. Her red nail polish clicked against each page as she pointed out key details. These policy changes weren't processed through Mr. Whitaker's registered channels. The email domain was deliberately similar, but it's not his. My hands stopped shaking for the first time in days. Jensen leaned forward, his reading glasses catching the fluorescent light. "And the phone verification? That's even more interesting." Ms. Chen pulled up another document. The caller claimed to be Michael Whitaker but failed 3 security questions. Then suddenly, there's an override notation citing alternate family authority. She looked at me directly. "We take these irregularities very seriously." Jensen slid the affidavit across to her. "Serious enough to sign this?" She uncapped her pen without hesitation. The scratch of her signature on paper sounded like hope. While she was signing, Jensen's phone buzzed. He stepped into the hallway, and I could hear his measured tone working its magic on someone. When he came back, there was a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. "Bank manager's on board," he said. "Better yet, Sally, the teller who processed those overrides is willing to testify." Seems Raymond's Family Authority Act didn't sit well with her, even at the time. We spent the next 3 hours in Jensen's office, assembling exhibits and marking tabs with the kind of attention to detail Grandpa Walter would have appreciated. The narrative we built was clean and simple. Grandpa's will, the orchestrated exile, the fire, and the paper trail of Raymond's schemes. Just as we were finishing, Jensen's phone lit up with an email from Raymond's lawyer. My stomach clenched as he read it. "They're trying to delay," he said, shaking his head, claiming holiday staffing issues makes it impossible to properly prepare. He typed a quick response, CCing the judge's clerk. The reply came within minutes. Judge Harrison wasn't having it. "Counsel is advised to be prepared at 9 a.m. as scheduled. No extensions." Walking out of the office, I passed wreaths and tinsel that seemed to belong to another world entirely. The December air bit at my face, but I barely felt it. There was something electric humming under my skin, like a low-grade current that wouldn't ground itself. "The judge's questions about those overrides," Jensen said as we stood by our cars. "That's not nothing." She sees the pattern. He adjusted his scarf against the wind. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Rest." Right. I lay in bed that night, staring at shadows on my ceiling. Every car passing outside sounded like a siren in my head. Every creak of the house echoed like Grandpa's voice. Leave now. Had he known even then how it would all unfold? I gave up on sleep around 4 in the morning, pulled on my best suit, the one I'd worn to Grandpa's last birthday dinner. Through the kitchen window, I watched ice crystallize on my windshield, each pattern spreading like tiny lightning bolts in the pre-dawn dark. Somewhere in town, Raymond was probably awake too. Was he rehearsing explanations, crafting new lies? Or had he finally realized what Grandpa had seen in him all along? I filled my travel mug with coffee that I knew I wouldn't drink, and headed out into the darkness. The roads were empty except for salt trucks, their warning lights painting the ice in flashes of amber. My headlights caught the courthouse dome long before I reached it, stone and copper rising against the stars like something out of a dream. But this wasn't a dream. This was Grandpa Walter's last lesson about character and fortune, playing out exactly as he'd planned. And in a few hours, we'd all learn just how well he'd taught it. I hadn't expected so many people. The courtroom was already packed when I pushed through the heavy wooden doors on New Year's Eve morning. A few reporters huddled in the back row, notebooks ready. Seemed word had gotten around about the emergency hearing. You know that feeling when your whole life hangs on the next few hours? Your mouth goes desert dry and time does this weird stretch and snap thing. That was me, trying to keep my hands steady as I slid into place beside Jensen. "Ready?" he asked, arranging papers with military precision. I nodded, not trusting my voice just yet. Across the aisle, Raymond sat with his lawyer, both of them in expensive suits that somehow looked rumpled anyway. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Judge Harrison swept in, her robes rustling like dark wings. "Call your first witness, Mr. Jensen." Sally the teller walked to the stand, smoothing her skirt as she sat. She looked exactly like you'd expect. Sensible shoes, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of person who'd worked at the same bank for 20 years. "Ms. Thompson," Jensen began, "could you describe your interaction with Raymond Whitaker on December 15th? He came in agitated, saying there was a family emergency." Her voice was clear, steady, He insisted I process withdrawals from accounts he wasn't authorized on, claiming he had family authority. And how did he react when you explained the proper procedures? He got pushy. She adjusted her glasses. Said I should make it easy and not create problems. When I hesitated, he mentioned being friends with the regional manager. Raymond's lawyer objected to characterization, but the judge just waved him quiet. Ms. Chen from compliance took the stand next. The fluorescent lights caught her pearl earrings as she detailed the policy change attempts. The metadata shows access from an IP address and email domain, consistent with Mr. Raymond Whitaker's known patterns, she explained. The attempts failed initial verification, but were pushed through with an override code. Raymond's lawyer tried to muddy the waters on cross, but Ms. Chen didn't budge. No, sir. These patterns are distinctly different from Michael Whitaker's registered access methods. The real hit came when Jensen pulled up Raymond's own calendar entries. Dates, times, locations, everything lined up with the bank visits and policy changes. Raymond's lawyer stumbled, papers shuffling too loud in the quiet room. Judge Harrison leaned forward, peering over her reading glasses. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, looking straight at me, "why exactly did your grandfather order you to leave that Christmas dinner?" The question hung there. I could feel every eye in the room. "He just said, 'Leave now,'" I answered, my voice rougher than I'd like. No explanation, just those words, in front of everyone. I swallowed hard. It was humiliating. "Your Honor," Jensen stood. "If I may, that command, which multiple witnesses confirm, quite possibly saved my client's life. It removed him from the property before the fire and preserved his ability to prove his innocence." The judge studied her notes for a long moment. "I'm going to take 20 minutes to review the conditional language in Walter Whitaker's will and consider these fraud referrals." She tapped her gavel. "Court is in brief recess." The room rustled to life. Raymond's lawyer leaned in close to him, whispering urgently. I stayed rooted to the pew, my knuckles white against the worn wood. Jensen squeezed my shoulder. "We did everything we could. Now we wait." Those 20 minutes felt like 20 years. I watched the minute hand drag across the courtroom clock face, each tick echoing in my chest. Around me, people whispered and shifted, but it all felt distant, like I was underwater. The bailiff's voice cut through it all. "All rise!" Everyone scrambled to their feet. Judge Harrison swept back in, her face unreadable as granite. "Be seated," she said, arranging papers with deliberate care. The silence that fell was absolute. Even the old radiators stopped their clanking, like the courthouse itself was holding its breath. I gripped the pew harder, feeling the grain of the wood against my palms. This was it. Everything Grandpa Walter had set in motion was about to come to a head. The judge looked up, and the world narrowed to her next words. Judge Harrison's voice filled the hushed courtroom. "Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, this court finds Walter Whitaker's sealed will both valid and binding." She paused, looking directly at Raymond. "Furthermore, the conditional requirements have been met. Michael Whitaker has proven beyond any reasonable doubt his non-involvement in both the insurance lapse and the subsequent fire." My chest loosened for the first time in weeks, but she wasn't finished. "The evidence presents a disturbing pattern of fraudulent activity by Raymond Whitaker." Her tone hardened. "Bank records show systematic attempts to manipulate accounts without authorization. Insurance documentation reveals deliberate interference with policy status. This court has no choice but to honor the explicit terms of Walter Whitaker's will, which disinherits Raymond Whitaker completely." Raymond's face went slack. His lawyer gripped his arm as he started to rise. "Mr. Raymond Whitaker," the judge continued, "this court is referring your case to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation into multiple counts of fraud. Bailiff, please ensure the DA's representative receives copies of all exhibits." She struck her gavel. "This ruling is final. Court is adjourned." The room erupted. Reporters who'd been scribbling furiously rushed for the doors, phones already pressed to their ears. I caught fragments of their calls. Breaking, fraud scheme, disinherited, criminal charges pending. In the hallway, cameras flashed as Raymond tried to push through the crowd. "No comment," his lawyer kept saying, but the damage was done. I saw neighbors I'd known for decades pressed against the walls, watching him pass with open disgust. Mrs. Henderson, who'd played bridge with my grandmother, actually turned her back as he walked by. "Michael," Mr. Jensen touched my elbow. "Let's get you out the side door." The December sun hit me like a physical thing as we stepped outside. The air was sharp with winter, but it felt clean in my lungs. For the first time since Christmas dinner, I really understood what Grandpa Walter had done. That command to leave, it wasn't rejection. It was protection. He'd seen what was coming and made sure I'd be clear of it, positioning me to expose the truth rather than become another victim of the fire. I spent the next 3 weeks at his surviving farmhouse. The property had good bones, but neglect had crept in around the edges. I started with the front porch. That's where Grandpa always said you could read a man's character. Every morning I'd show up with coffee and tools, sanding railings until my hands ached. I replaced warped boards, matched paint colors, and worked until sunset painted the sky. The physical labor helped quiet my mind. Each piece I restored felt like resetting my own life. No dramatic gestures needed, just honest work, done right. Mr. Jensen stopped by one afternoon as I was finishing the last coat of paint. He didn't say much, just walked the length of the porch, running his hand along the fresh banister. When he reached the end, he turned and gave me a single nod. That was enough. After he left, I stood there letting the wind move through the cedar trees. It carried the sharp smell of new paint and old wood. My hand found the smooth banister, and I could almost feel Grandpa Walter standing there with me. The porch gleamed in the winter light, every board and nail speaking of care and attention. Looking at it, I finally said aloud what Grandpa had taught us all along. Character outlives every lie. Those words settled into the clean air like truth finding its home.